Hey everyone. You know how we love finding those under-the-radar historical spots, those real hidden gems?
Absolutely.
Well, get this. Today, we're diving deep into a town in Australia called Carcoar,
Oh, Carcoar.
and it's like stepping back in time. Seriously, think like frozen in the 1800s, streets lined with original buildings, the whole nine
It's
yards.
incredible.
We've got maps, old records, even some wild bushranger tales to work with.
Should be fun.
So where do we even start with a place like this?
Well, Carcoar's story begins way back in 1821.
1821.
Yeah. Practically the dawn of European settlement in Australia, just a few years after the first fleet.
Well, that's early. Talk about frontier life.
Right. Imagine being among those first settlers, a vast unknown land.
It's like the Australian Wild West or something. And speaking of carving out a new life, there's Thomas Isley,
Oh, yes, Thomas Isley.
one of the first landowners around there. Set up his property, Cooming Park, in 1829. And then just 10 years later, boom, 1839, Carcoar officially becomes a town.
Officially a town, yep.
And get this, it's the third oldest town west of the Blue Mountains.
Which is huge, because those mountains were a serious obstacle back then. Took years for those early explorers to find a way across.
So once they did, it was like opening up a whole new frontier.
Exactly. So Carcoar being established so early, it really shows that pioneering spirit. But here's the thing, it's not just old, it's amazingly well preserved.
Well preserved. How well preserved are we talking?
Not just a few buildings here and there. The entire town is listed by the National Trust. That's incredibly real. Very strict criteria to meet.
So it's not just being old, it's maintaining that authenticity. But what does that actually mean for someone visiting today? I mean, we've all seen places that claim to be historic, but it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Oh, you're right. It's got to be more than just age. In Carcoar, think streets lined with the original stuff. Brick, sandstone, slate roofs.
The real deal.
You step back in time, literally you could almost hear the echoes. Like those cobblestone streets are whispering stories.
Okay, I can picture it now. So what are some of the architectural highlights? What shouldn't we miss?
Oh, so many. There's the Carcoar Public School. It's founded in 1857, and get this, it's still operating.
No way.
Generations of kids all learning in the same building.
That's amazing. And I know we have to talk about St. Paul's Anglican Church. What can you tell us about that one?
St. Paul's, a masterpiece. Gothic revival style, designed by Edmund Blackett.
Edmund Blackett.
One of Australia's most important colonial architects. You've probably seen his work all over those iconic buildings.
I probably have. Okay, so St. Paul's, what's special about it?
Well, first, just the grandeur, soaring arches, the details, it really transports you.
Right.
Then there's this tower added in 1874.
A tower?
A bit of an oddity, really. It doesn't quite match the original style. Lots of debate about why they did it that way. But inside, oh, the interior. Original brick floors, the Isley family pew.
Wow.
Real tangible links to those early days we were talking about.
You've painted quite the picture. But we can't forget the, shall we say, more adventurous side of Carcoar's past.
Ah, yes, the Bushrangers.
More than just outlaws, these were legendary figures in Australian history, right?
That's right. They hold this unique place in Australian folklore. The romantic rebels fighting the system. Kind of like Robin Hood types.
But I imagine the reality was a bit more complicated.
Oh, absolutely. Some were ruthless, no doubt. Others may be driven to it by circumstance, injustice. It's a fascinating part of Australia's history, full of complexities.
And Carcoar has a particularly dramatic bushranger story, doesn't it? Something about a bank robbery.
Oh, you mean the attempted robbery of the Commercial Banking Company of Sydney in 1863?
That's the one. Tell me everything.
Australia's first documented daylight bank robbery attempt. And it involves two of the most notorious bushrangers, Johnny Gilbert and John O'Mealy.
Okay, those names sound familiar.
Gilbert, he was known for his cunning, very charming. O'Mealy, a bit more, hot-headed, unpredictable.
Quite the pair.
A real dynamic duo.
So what happened? Did they get away with it?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
You're going to leave us hanging.
I think we need to save that story for part 2, but I'll tell you this. It caused quite the sensation, added to those bushranger legends. A glimpse into that wild, sometimes lawless side of Australia back then.
Oh, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. But before we get to that dramatic climax, there's one more thing about Carcoar that just blows my mind. The sheer number of museums in this tiny town.
Right. It's incredible.
I was reading that it might even have the highest museum per capita ratio in all of Australia.
Wouldn't surprise me one bit. They really embrace their history. And the museums are a great way to really dig into specific parts of Carcoar's story. Like, what kind of museum do you think you'd be drawn to?
Ooh, that's a good question. Knowing me, Probably something a bit offbeat, a little quirky. You know what? That's the perfect cliffhanger to leave our listeners on. We'll be back in a flash to reveal which museum caught my eye and what makes it so unique.
It really is amazing how Carcoar is practically a museum in itself.
I know, right? We were talking about the architecture, but it's like the whole atmosphere.
Yeah.
You're just transported back in time.
Exactly. And that's what makes that story of Johnny Gilbert and John O'Meally even better, their attempted bank robbery.
Oh, yeah, I want to hear all about this.
Picture it. Sunny afternoon, 1863. Carcoar, life's moving along, shopkeepers, kids playing. And suddenly,
Two masked men bursting into the bank, guns blazing.
well, not exactly guns blazing, but definitely causing chaos.
Yeah.
Gilbert and O'Meally, armed with pistols, demanding all the money.
Wow, a real Wild West showdown right in Carcoar.
You got it. The bank manager, though, Henry Brown, brave guy, he refused to give in. So it's this tense standoff.
I bet.
And the townspeople, they hear the commotion. They're gathering outside, watching it all go down. Shots are fired. Thankfully, nobody's seriously hurt.
Phew, that's lucky.
But in the end, Gilbert and O'Meally, they realize they're outnumbered. So they make this daring escape on horseback.
What a story. No wonder these bushrangers became legends.
Yep.
Defying authority, living on their own terms. I wonder if there are any clues left behind in Carcoar today.
That's what's so cool about a place like this. You never know what you'll find. Speaking of mysteries, remember that St. William bell we talked about?
Oh, right. The one that keeps popping up, but there's no real info on it.
Exactly. We've got the schoolhouse bell tower, the churches with their bell coats. But St. William, where does that fit in?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's like a ghost story in the historical records.
A real historical mystery. So where do we even begin to look for more info?
Well, what kind of bell are we talking about? A big church bell? A smaller one?
Good point. That could tell us where it might have been.
And the name, St. William? Could be connected to a specific saint, right? Like a patron saint.
Definitely possible. Or maybe a donor, someone who helped get the bell made.
It's like we're detectives, piecing together the clues. Maybe someone listening right now has a piece of the puzzle, a family story or something.
That would be incredible. Solving a mystery that's been hidden for so long shows the power of, sharing what we know about the past. But even if we never find the actual bell, the search is what's fun. Connecting with history.
I totally agree. That's what I love about these deep dives. It's the discovery, the aha moments. And Carcoar has all that in spades. Charming streets, great stories, and these lingering mysteries.
It really does. And, speaking of uncovering the unexpected, there's one more thing about Carcoar that I think you'll find fascinating.
Ooh, you've got me hooked. What is it? All right, lay it on me. What's this fascinating thing about Carcoar?
Remember how we were talking about it being like a living museum? Well, there's this one detail. Often gets overlooked, but it's so important.
Now I'm really curious.
Think about most historic towns, right? Usually they have those designated areas, the historic district, and then the newer part of town.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Carcoar, it's different. The whole town, the whole thing is preserved. It's like one big heritage area.
Whoa, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So you're constantly surrounded by history.
Exactly. And it's not just the buildings, it's everything. Those little details like the hitching posts, the old street lamps,
Oh, now those.
the iron lace on the balconies, even how the streets are laid out, it all points back to a different time.
It's like a time capsule. I can almost see myself there, taking it all in.
It really is an escape. You can practically hear those horses' hooves on the cobblestones. Imagine the people.
Like that.
It's truly a feast for the senses. And that's what I think would get you about Carcoar. It's not just seeing history, it's feeling it.
You're right. There's something so powerful about that. But it makes me think about the challenges of preserving a town like this. It must be tough with modern life and everything.
Oh, it's a balancing act for sure. Sharing this incredible heritage, but also protecting it.
A lot of historic towns deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Staying true to the past while still moving forward.
Exactly. And it's something we should all think about. Preserving history is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. We have to appreciate these places, learn from them.
Couldn't agree more. Well, I think we've really uncovered the magic of Carcoar today. From those early settlers to the architecture, the bushrangers, even that St. William Bell mystery.
It's a place that sticks with you.
I bet. Maybe someday I'll get to see it for myself. And hey, if any of our listeners have been to Carcoar, we want to hear from you.
Yes. Share your stories, especially anything about that bell.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Carcoar, Australia. Until next time, keep exploring and keep those imaginations going.